Hello everyone. I hope you enjoy listening to the story. My name is Daniel Cart and I am 27 years old. I signed the order that permanently banned my parents from every airline in the country. 17 years ago. They left me alone at an international airport to see if I could figure life out. Today I stood in a glass office above Terminal 3, watching two aging figures argue with a check-in agent who looked seconds away from calling security. The system had already flagged them. That was why my assistant knocked on the door and said, "Sir, we have a situation you might want to review." I did not need the screen to tell me who they were. Time had changed their faces, but not enough. I knew the way my mother pressed her lips when she felt entitled. I knew the sharp tilt of my father's chin when he thought he was right. They did not recognize me, but I knew exactly who they were. I walked closer to the monitor, my reflection faint against the footage. The agent kept apologizing, explaining that their boarding passes had been denied. My father raised his voice. My mother demanded a supervisor. I heard none of it clearly, but I did not need to. I had heard those tones before. Authority without consequence. Confidence without accountability. I pressed a button and the system pulled up their full profiles. Years of travel history. Violations. Complaints. And one buried note that most people would never notice. I noticed everything. I always had. "Are you sure about this?" my assistant asked quietly when I opened the authorization panel. I did not look at him. I had been sure for 17 years. My finger hovered for a moment, not because I hesitated, but because I understood the weight of what I was about to do. Permanent flight restriction. No appeals. No exceptions. A person erased from the sky. Some people think power is loud. They think it looks like shouting or threats. They are wrong. Real power is silent. It sits behind glass and waits. I confirmed the order. The system processed it in less than a second. Down below, nothing changed at first. Then the agent's screen updated. Her posture stiffened. He called someone. Within minutes, security began moving toward them. I leaned back slowly, letting the moment settle. 17 years collapsed into a single decision. They thought what they did was a lesson. They thought abandoning a 10-year-old in a foreign airport would teach independence, resilience, strength. Maybe it did. Just not in the way they expected. It did not break me. It built something colder. Something precise. If someone left you alone in a foreign airport at 10 years old, would you forgive them, or would you make sure they never traveled again? I remember the exact moment they decided to leave me. It did not feel dramatic at first. There was no shouting, no warning, no final goodbye that would make it easier to understand. We were standing near gate C-17, surrounded by the constant hum of rolling suitcases and distant boarding calls echoing through the terminal. My mother adjusted her scarf, glanced at my father, and then looked down at me with a smile that felt rehearsed. "Stay right here," she said. "We will be back in a few minutes." My father nodded, already distracted, already somewhere else in his mind. I believed them. Of course I did. I was 10 years old. You are supposed to believe your parents. That is the rule you grow up with, the invisible contract that says they will not leave you behind. At first, I did not even sit down. I stood there holding my small backpack, watching the crowd move around me like a river that never stopped flowing. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I checked the spot where they had disappeared, expecting them to reappear at any second with coffee or food or some explanation. An hour went by. The gate display changed flights. The crowd shifted. The people who had been around me left, replaced by strangers who did not even glance in my direction. That was when something inside me tightened. Not fear yet. Not panic. Just a quiet, growing awareness that something was wrong. I sat down eventually, choosing a chair near the charging stations because it felt like a place where people stayed longer. I wanted to blend in. I kept my eyes fixed on the walkway, scanning every face that passed by, convinced that I had simply missed them in the crowd. 2 hours turned into 3. My stomach started to ache, not just from hunger but from the kind of tension a child cannot name. I tried calling my mother's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried my father's number. The same result. I told myself their batteries must have died. That was easier to believe than the alternative. As the hours stretched on, the airport began to change. The bright energy of the afternoon faded into a colder, quieter atmosphere. Lights seemed harsher. Announcements echoed louder in the emptier space. I watched a janitor slowly push a cart across the polished floor. The wheels squeaking in a rhythm that felt too steady, too indifferent. People around me moved with purpose, boarding flights, meeting loved ones, continuing their lives. I stayed in the same chair, shrinking into myself, trying to take up as little space as possible. Do you know what it feels like to realize you were not forgotten, you were abandoned? It does not hit all at once. It seeps in layer by layer until the truth is impossible to ignore. At some point, an airport security officer approached me. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to my level, his voice calm but firm. "Where are your parents?" he asked. I felt my throat tighten, but I forced out the answer I had been repeating in my head. "They are coming back," I said. "They told me to wait." He studied my face for a moment as if trying to decide whether to believe me or not. Then he nodded slowly and told me to stay where I was. He walked away, but I could feel his eyes on me from a distance. I understood something then. If I admitted the truth, everything would change. Police reports, questions I could not answer. So I held on to the lie because the lie gave me control. Night fell without ceremony. One moment the terminal was dim. The next it was quiet enough to hear individual footsteps echo across the floor. I curled up slightly in the chair, hugging my backpack, using it as both a pillow and a shield. I do not remember falling asleep, only waking up with a stiff neck and a deeper emptiness in my chest. They were still not there. No messages. No missed calls. Nothing. Hunger gnawed at me sharper now. And I counted the coins in my pocket before buying the cheapest thing I could find from a vending machine. Tasted like cardboard, but it kept me going. By the second day, the illusion had fully broken. I stopped looking for them in every passing face. I stopped expecting footsteps that would never come. The airport was no longer a place of waiting. It was a place I had to survive. A woman who worked at a nearby kiosk noticed me lingering and asked if I was okay. I nodded, always nodding, always pretending. She offered me a bottle of water anyway. I took it with both hands, whispering a thank you that barely made a sound. Small kindnesses felt dangerous, like they might expose the truth I was trying so hard to contain. Late that afternoon, the same security officer returned, this time with another staff member. A woman in a uniform who spoke gently but asked direct questions. I answered carefully, sticking to the same story, repeating the same line. "They will come back." The woman exchanged a glance with the officer, then crouched down in front of me. "What if they do not?" she asked softly. That question landed heavier than anything else. I did not answer. I could not. Because if I said it out loud, it would become real. They gave me a choice that day. Not in so many words, but in the way they handled me. They could take me into the system, turn me into a case file, a problem to be processed. Or they could let me stay a little longer, give me time to decide what I wanted to do next. I chose silence. I chose to stay. I chose not to be found. That was the moment everything shifted. I stopped being the child who was waiting to be rescued. I became the one who understood that no one was coming. And once you understand that, something inside you changes permanently. I stopped being their child that day. I became something else. 17 years is a long time to disappear, but it is also a long time to build something no one sees coming. I did not leave that airport with a grand plan or some dramatic promise whispered into the night. I left with nothing but a quiet decision. If no one was coming to save me, then I would make sure I never needed saving again. The woman from airport staff helped me contact a temporary shelter, but I refused to give them my parents' names. I refused to be sent back. That was the first time I chose control over comfort, and it would not be the last. Life after that was not a clean story. It was not a straight path. It was a series of small, deliberate steps that slowly added up to something bigger than survival. I learned quickly that systems run the world, not people. Airports taught me that. Every movement, every decision, every clearance, all controlled by invisible layers most passengers never think about. While other kids focused on fitting in, I focused on understanding how things worked. I took part-time jobs as soon as I was old enough, starting with cleaning crews and baggage handling. Anything that kept me inside the environment that had once abandoned me. I watched everything. I listened more than I spoke. People underestimate how much you can learn when you are invisible. They talk freely. They make mistakes. They reveal patterns. And I remembered every single one. By the time I turned 18, I knew I did not want to leave the aviation world. Not because I loved planes, but because I understood power lived there. Movement is control. Access is control. If you can decide who moves and who stays grounded, you hold something most people never even realize exists. I enrolled in a public university, studying aviation management and regulatory law, working nights to pay for everything myself. I did not stand out. I did not need to. I was not there to impress anyone. I was there to position myself. My first real job was as ground staff at a regional airport. Low pay, long hours, constant pressure. I welcomed it. It gave me access. I learned how check-in systems flagged passengers, how security protocols escalated issues, how decisions moved up the chain. I saw where authority actually lived. It was not always with the loudest person in the room. It was with the one who could say yes or no at the right moment. I kept moving, promotion by promotion, never drawing attention to my past, never sharing more than necessary. Compliance officer came next, then regulatory analyst. And eventually I stepped into a role most people only reach after decades. Aviation security director. The title did not matter to me. The access did. People think power is money. They are wrong. Power is access. Power is knowing the right system to use at the exact moment it matters. By then, I had full authority over enforcement decisions tied to passenger risk violations and travel restrictions. The no-fly list was not something I created, but it was something I controlled within my jurisdiction. Every addition required justification, documentation, and approval. It was not personal. It was supposed to be objective. That was what made it powerful. No one questions a system when it appears neutral. I never actively searched for them. That is the part most people misunderstand. I did not spend years hunting my parents down or waiting for revenge. I built a life that did not require their existence. But memory does not disappear just because you refuse to feed it. It waits quietly. It sharpens over time. There were moments, small and unexpected, when something would trigger it. A child crying at a gate. A family arguing over luggage. A delayed flight announcement that made someone panic. Each time I felt that old sensation rise for just a second, then fade. Not pain anymore. Something colder. Something precise. The system logs everything. That is the nature of modern travel. Names, identification numbers, travel histories, behavioral flags. People leave trails without realizing it. I understood those trails better than most. Still, I never crossed the line into searching for them. Not because I could not, but because I did not need to. I believed something simple. The system always finds everyone eventually. No one moves forever without intersecting with it again. Airports are crossroads. Sooner or later, every path circles back. Over time, my perspective shifted completely. I stopped thinking in terms of forgiveness or anger. Those emotions require energy and I preferred efficiency. What mattered to me was control. Structure. Balance. Something disrupted that, I corrected it. If someone violated it, I enforced consequences. That was my role. That was my function. And I was very good at it. My colleagues respected me because I was consistent. I did not bend rules for sympathy. I did not escalate situations for ego. I applied the system exactly as it was designed. Nothing more, nothing less. Then one afternoon, everything aligned. It started like any other routine check. The system flagged a discrepancy tied to identification verification at a check-in counter. That alone was not unusual. It happens more often than people think. My assistant forwarded the case to me because the alert triggered a secondary review requirement. I opened the file without expectation. Just another name. Just another case. But the moment I saw it, something shifted. Not a surge of emotion. Not shock. Recognition. Immediate and absolute. Their names appeared on my screen. I did not rush to the terminal when their names appeared. That is the first thing you need to understand. People expect revenge to be emotional, impulsive, explosive. Mine was none of those things. I closed the file for a moment, leaned back in my chair, and let the silence settle around me. 17 years collapsed into a single line of data, and yet I felt nothing urgent pulling me forward. I had spent too long building control to lose it now. When I finally stood up, it was not out of anger. It was procedure. By the time I reached the observation corridor overlooking the check-in area, security had already formed a loose perimeter. They were not aggressive yet, just present, watching, waiting for instructions. My parents stood at the counter, visibly frustrated, their voices cutting through the low hum of the terminal. My father's hand slammed lightly against the desk as he spoke, his tone sharp with entitlement. My mother leaned forward, her expression tight, insisting on escalation, demanding to speak to someone with authority. I recognized every gesture. Nothing had changed. Time had worn them down physically, but inside they were exactly the same. I watched them for a full minute before stepping forward. Not because I needed time to prepare, but because I wanted to observe. People reveal themselves most clearly when they think they are right. The agent behind the counter maintained her composure, repeating policy, explaining that their boarding clearance had been revoked pending review. My father laughed in disbelief, a short, dismissive sound. "There has to be a mistake," he said. "Fix it. Not please. Not can you help. Just fix it." My mother added, "We have a connecting flight. We cannot be delayed because of your system error." The word system lingered in my mind. They had no idea how right they were. I stepped into their line of sight without announcing myself. The agent glanced at me first, relief flashing across her face for just a second before she straightened her posture. "Sir," she said quietly. My parents turned at the same time. Their eyes passed over me without recognition. The way you look at someone you assume is just another employee. For a brief moment, I considered letting that remain. Letting them walk away confused, denied, insignificant. But that would not complete the equation. This was not just about denial. It was about understanding. "What seems to be the issue?" I asked, my voice even controlled. My father answered immediately, stepping closer as if proximity alone could shift authority. "Your system flagged our tickets incorrectly. We need this resolved now." My mother nodded in agreement, her gaze scanning my uniform, trying to assess my rank, my usefulness. I held her stare for a second longer than necessary. Still nothing. No recognition. Just calculation. I had become invisible to them in a completely different way. "There is no error," I said. The words landed calmly, but they carried weight. My father frowned, irritation sharpening his features. "Then explain it," he snapped. "Why are we being denied boarding?" I turned slightly, gesturing toward the nearby screen where their status had been updated. "Your travel privileges have been revoked," I said. "Effective immediately." My mother's expression shifted first, confusion breaking through her confidence. "Revoked? That does not make any sense," she said. "We have done nothing wrong." That sentence almost made me smile. Almost. "You have a right to request a formal explanation," I replied, maintaining the structure of protocol, "but the restriction is permanent." The word permanent hung in the air longer than anything else. My father took a step forward, his voice rising. "You cannot do that," he said. "We are not criminals." I tilted my head slightly, studying him the same way I used to study system patterns. "This is not a criminal designation," I said. "This is an administrative enforcement decision." He did not understand the distinction, but it did not matter. The outcome was the same. My mother's eyes narrowed as she looked at me again, this time with more focus, more attention. Something in my voice, maybe the cadence, maybe the lack of reaction, triggered a flicker of recognition. "Have we met before?" she asked slowly. There was the first crack. I held her gaze, letting the silence stretch just enough to make the moment uncomfortable. "Yes," I said. "A long time ago." My father glanced between us, irritation giving way to uncertainty. "What is this?" he demanded. "If this is some kind of personal issue, you need to step aside and let someone else handle it." I let out a quiet breath, not of frustration but of finality. "It is personal," I said. "But it is also fully within policy." My mother's face paled slightly as realization began to take shape. Wait, she said, her voice softer now, searching. No, that is not possible. I stepped closer just enough to remove any doubt. Gate C17, I said. You told me to stay there. You said you would be back in a few minutes. The color drained from her face completely. My father's expression froze, the pieces aligning too quickly for denial to hold. For a moment no one spoke. The noise of the terminal faded into something distant, irrelevant. My mother's lips parted but no words came out. My father looked at me as if trying to rewrite the past in real time. As if there was still a version of this where he was not responsible. We came back, he said finally, his voice unsteady now. We looked for you. I held his gaze, steady, unyielding. 17 years late is not coming back, I said. My father's shoulders dropped first. Not dramatically, not like in movies, but just enough to show the shift. The confidence drained out of him in small, quiet pieces. My mother, on the other hand, stepped forward as if she could still fix this with words. You do not understand, she said quickly, her voice trembling now. We were trying to teach you something. We thought you would call for help. That someone would step in. It was supposed to make you stronger. I watched her carefully, searching for any sign of regret that felt real. There was none. Only justification wrapped in panic. You left a 10-year-old alone in a foreign airport for 2 days, I said. My voice did not rise. Did not need to. That is not a lesson. That is abandonment. My father ran a hand over his face, avoiding my eyes. We came back, he repeated, weaker this time, like the sentence itself had lost meaning. You were gone. I nodded once, acknowledging the statement without accepting it. Yes, I said. I was. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything they had said. Around us, people had started to notice. Passengers slowed their steps, glancing over, sensing something unfolding. Security stood closer now, waiting for my signal. My mother reached out. Her hand hovering in the air as if she could bridge 17 years with a single gesture. Please, she said. We can fix this. We can talk. We are still your parents. I looked at her hand, then back at her face. No, I said quietly. You stopped being that a long time ago. I turned slightly toward the agent and nodded. That was all it took. The system had already processed the restriction, but now it moved into enforcement. One of the security officers stepped forward, his tone professional but firm. Sir, ma'am, you need to come with us. My father stiffened immediately, instinctively resisting. This is ridiculous, he snapped, though the force behind his words was gone. You cannot treat us like this. The officer did not react. He had heard it all before. This is not optional, he replied. My mother's composure broke completely then. Tears filled her eyes, her voice rising in desperation. You cannot do this to us, she said, looking directly at me. We are your family. I held her gaze, steady, unmoved. Family does not leave a child behind and call it a lesson, I said. This is not something I am doing to you. This is something you set in motion 17 years ago. The words landed exactly where they needed to. Not loud. Not cruel. Just final. Security guided them away slowly, not roughly, but with enough presence to make it clear there was no argument left to have. My father did not look back. My mother did, over and over, as if expecting something to change, as if waiting for me to call them back. I did not. I stood there until they disappeared past the corridor. Until the noise of the terminal swallowed them completely. Then I turned and walked back toward the glass office above the terminal, the same place where this had begun. Everything looked the same as before. Planes arriving, planes departing, thousands of people moving through their own stories, their own destinations. I sat down, opened the system again, and moved on to the next case. That is the thing about control. It does not pause for reflection. It continues. But for a brief moment I allowed myself to look at the departure board, rows of cities lighting up in sequence. Everyone was going somewhere. Not everyone was allowed to come back. So tell me, if you were me, would you have let them board that plane? I do not know if what I did counts as justice or something colder. Maybe both. What I do know is this. Some choices do not end when the moment passes. They echo. They wait. And one day they come back in a form no one expects. I was just a child sitting alone under fluorescent lights, believing someone would return. They never did. So I became the kind of person who does not wait anymore. The kind who decides who moves forward and who stays behind. Life has a way of balancing things out, just not always in the way people hope. If this story made you feel something, take a second to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. And I want to hear your thoughts. Was I too harsh, or was this exactly what they deserved? Tell me in the comments.